106 miles to New Orleans. We got a full tank of gas, a bunch of cocaine. It's dark out and we're wearing helmets. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. We don't know what to watch, where I almost had an aneurysm and forgot what this was.
Yeah, man, you dig?
I dig it. With me is the Billy to my Wyatt, the Jack Nicholson to my Nicolas Cage. May have gone off the rails there. But here is Kyle Mulford and I'm Noah Saturn.
I dig it. So what did we watch?
We watched the cinematic classic from the year 1969, Easy Rider. Not to be confused with Easy Rider 2.
Electric.
No. Easy Rider 2 exists.
Yeah, I actually saw that.
And you watched it, I'm sure.
No, I didn't.
To find out what happens next.
If it's on streaming somewhere, I'm gonna watch it. I'm sure it has Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper in it.
Yep.
Because it looks like they really liked each other during the production of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
What's a little bit about this movie?
It's the story of a man who went looking for America and couldn't find it anywhere.
I think you already said we got to sell some cocaine and drive off to New Orleans.
Yep.
There you go, folks. That's the podcast.
Yep. This is one of those movies that they tell you about in your film history classes.
Yeah, and for good reason. I mean, there's a lot about it that's culturally relevant.
Yep, it's a small independent movie that did well at the box office, and then the lesson studios took from that was like, hey, maybe if we just let directors just kind of do their thing, we might make a ton of money off of it.
And it brought in like they called like the American New Wave, kind of
the new Hollywood era.
The new Hollywood era, kind of similar to the French New Wave, where it was bringing in a lot of realism into films and getting rid of the fake Hollywood plastic movies, and showing what it was really like. And then also...
And now we just have fake Hollywood green screen movies.
Yeah. So we didn't learn our lesson.
Nope.
So, learn from history, people. Well, I don't know. People like, I guess, the fake Hollywood green screen because Endgame made $1 billion.
It's only the highest grossing movie of all time.
But anyway, yeah, this brought in like real actors, kind of like the French New Wave did, and not real actors, but like actors mixed with real people, and kind of showed what was really happening. It was kind of also a counterculture movement, because this was late 60s after the Civil War, and then
the Civil War.
The Civil War. I was thinking like
1960s,
the Vietnam War and civil rights. That equals the Civil War.
Technically after the Civil War. It was made in the 1860s, I suppose.
Way after the Civil War. We're still mad about it.
Vietnam didn't end until the early 70s, so this would have been in the midst of it.
Yeah, so, and then we had all the civil rights going on and everything, so I don't think Hollywood was really depicting that, so they wanted to show what was really happening. And that's an interesting bit about this movie, so, I mean, we can get into that after kind of going through the film, because there's a lot to talk about with that, so. A couple little things. This had a budget of $360,000 because Peter Fonda said, that just sounded like a good amount to ask for. That wasn't too much or too little, and they gave it to him. So he was also the producer on this film. It's got an 88% with critics on Rotten Tomatoes, 82% with users, and it grossed $60 million. So off of a $360,000 budget. That's
a solid profit margin.
That was a successful little movie.
Yes.
It was the third highest grossing movie of 1969. It got Jack Nicholson a Best Supporting Actor nomination, and a nomination for Best Original Screenplay. And it did win Best First Work at Cannes. Cannes? Do you pronounce the S?
I don't know. I've never been there. All I know is the French Film Festival with the palms.
And it was a nominee for the Palme d'Or. Palme d'Or. I'm not French.
I think it's the Palme au jus sauce.
So this one interesting thing is that this movie, Peter Fonda was a producer, but one of the executive producers was a guy named Bert Schneider. and he was part of BBS, which it stood for Burt and two other producers, and they had worked on television shows a lot. Easy Rider would not exist without the Monkees. I found that a fascinating fact.
Huh.
Because Burt used the profits they made off of the Monkees being so successful as a TV show, because they had the rights to the TV show, the music, and everything. And the Monkees were so successful that he used some of the money from the Monkees' profits to make this movie.
Interesting. Yeah, I suppose.
So thank you, Monkees, for bringing us Easy Rider.
Yeah. Thank you, Monkees, for helping kickstart the new Hollywood era.
I'm a believer.
Of the 1970s.
So this movie starts off with a drug deal.
Yep.
We got Coke coming in and
from Mexico.
From Mexico, Fonda and Hopper are trying to load off some Coke so that they can get a bunch of money and live the American dream and be free to do what they want to. Be free to be who they want to be. Mm-hmm. And they sell the Coke to Phil Spector, of all people.
I mean, are you surprised?
No, but this is his only movie credit.
Interesting.
So, for those that don't know, Phil Spector is he was huge in the music industry as a producer.
He was probably most famous for creating the Wall of Sound. Tons of instruments, very unique. If you've heard the Wall of Sound, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't think I've heard it.
I'm sure you have at some point.
Probably. Yeah, so they do a drug deal on a service road behind an airport. And there are so many facts about this movie that I find interesting that I'm going to throw in here. Is that Fonda saw this service road behind the airport when he was flying into LA, and he's like, oh, that'd be a great place to have a drug deal for the movie. So they just went there, and you see Phil Spector constantly ducking every time a plane flew overhead, and they said for real, he was paranoid and kept that was just his reaction.
Also, were the drugs real that they used?
No, the cocaine was not.
Well, that's honestly disappointing.
Yeah, all of the marijuana in the movie was, and they were high during the shooting of the movie.
That makes perfect sense.
So, because we'll get to that with the Jack Nicholson scene too. Yeah, so they get the drug money, and then you see them put it in this little plastic tube, and you've got Fonda as Captain America, which
real name Wyatt.
Real name Wyatt. They were gonna actually name them Captain America and Bucky, but I think Marvel was gonna sue them, so they changed. They actually had some scenes filmed where they called Hopper Bucky, and they had to go and shoot over those few scenes, but they kept in all the Captain America stuff. So it must be just
more of a nickname, I guess.
Yeah, more of a nickname, and since they didn't use Bucky in conjunction with it, maybe Marvel backed off. Right? Who knows? It was the drug-addled 60s. Who knows? Who knows what of the stuff that we're about to go over is actually true, because they were all high at the time anyway. So listening to them on commentaries from 30 or 40 years after that, how much of this stuff is stuff that they remember accurately? Really. The whole movie seemed like one of those, when you drink in college and you have all those stories where you're either A, I can't believe I got away with that, or B, I can't believe nobody died. That's basically this whole movie.
Yeah, that and pretty much multiple Werner Herzog movies.
And the movie Roar, if you've never seen that.
Oh, that's insane. The story behind that is insane.
Have you watched that?
I haven't seen Roar.
You need to find it. I actually just watched it a couple months ago, and it literally is insane. When you watch it, you go, holy shit, what were they thinking?
Sometimes there's movies where the behind the scenes stories is more fascinating than the movie. But it's something like Hearts of Darkness.
But the movie, though, for Roar, the behind the scenes is actually in front of the camera. Because
That's
it's
true.
You see the animals attacking
There's
people.
There's no subtext. There's just text.
It just really is. And it's crazy through all the movie. You're sitting there going, are they going to get eaten? What is going on? But anyway.
Hearts of Darkness, which is, of course,
that's what I haven't seen
now documentary. And then I've also heard that Lost Souls, which is the documentary about the 1990s version of The Island of Dr. Moreau. Which is also just insane because all the weird things that happened.
Apparently, if you worked with Marlon Brando in this 60s, 70s, or 80s, mostly the 70s and 80s, you've probably got some insane stories.
Late period Marlon Brando is pretty weird.
Like where there's, I don't know if it's just one movie or several where he refused to wear pants, so they couldn't film him from the waist down. So that man got insane after a while.
I don't know. In the island of Dr. Moreau, I know this is Tangent Town, but that's okay. The story goes is that like he would refuse to learn his lines.
Yeah.
So someone would like read them to him over like an earpiece, then he'd say them. But then apparently somehow that earpiece was picking up like a police scanner, so we just say like in the middle of the take, like, there's a robbery at Woolworths.
And then you have, of course, Superman, where he refused to learn the word Krypton.
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 I'm from Krypton.
I'm from Krypton.
So, back to the movie at hand. They get their money, they put it in a little tube, and then they shove it into the gas tank of Fonda's motorcycle, which, even if you haven't seen the movie, you recognize the motorcycle with the American flag gas tank. And so, like, it was great because in all the commentaries, all they ever said about the symbolism of that is like, yeah, it's like punching a hole through the American flag with money. I'm going, yeah, that's literally what was on screen. Like, they don't say anything else about, like, what they meant by that. They just punching a hole through the American flag with money. Yeah.
Thanks, Dennis.
That was mostly Fonda that would say that in all the
commentaries. Peter.
And I'm going, so, okay, cool. Yep, you literally did that. And then when they take off from the drug deal, he takes off his watch and throws it away, symbolizing they're free now. They don't have to live by time or government or whatever. Kind of like that town in Norway now that's getting rid of time.
I didn't hear about that.
Oh, look it up. There's a town, I think it's in Norway, one of those countries up there that's it's a small town, and they're trying to abolish the concept of time there.
Bro.
Oh, the interesting things you read on the internet. So then you see the first of many, many times where they put on a 60s rock song and ride down the highway.
The soundtrack is great in this movie.
Well, the first song is, of course, Goddamn the Pusher Man. So, because they just did a drug deal. So we got to be really on the nose with that.
Yeah, like a solid, I forget how much, but it seemed like a solid amount of the budget went to licensing the music.
It was like $1 million, which is like 3 times the production cost of the whole movie. Yeah. But the thing is that's one thing that Hopper mentioned a lot was this was one of the first movies to use a soundtrack like this instead of using like a special score for a movie and songs written for movies. It had been done before, like the Beatles would use their soundtracks, on their movies or whatever. And I think there had been a couple others, but this was one of the first big movies to use pre-done music. And even though they paid like $1 million in licensing, they said like back then it was really easy. All you had to do was ask permission from the artist. Now it's like you got to get permission from the artist. You got to get permission from the production company.
You got to get
the producers
from the producer's grandma,
the record companies. Like just like you got to go through a lot of hoops. Where back then it's like, here's some money. Can I use your song? Mm-hmm. Okay. So they got stuff like, I can't even think of everybody that was on the Birds and
Born to Be Wild.
Yeah. And then they even used a couple.
They covered a Bob Dylan song.
Yeah, and then Bob Dylan wrote like the first 2 lines of the Easy Rider theme over the credits, which I find was interesting because then he gave it to the Byrds lead singer, and they gave it to Hopper and Fonda and said, "Here, give this to." Can't think of the guy's name, the lead singer of the Byrds. He'll know what to do with it, and then he wrote the rest of it. So. A lot of interesting stuff with the music, too. So they're riding down, and then they find a hitchhiker. And as Dumb and Dumber says, hitchhikers, pick them up.
So they pick up the hitchhiker, they go around. This movie very much feels like a picaresque narrative, which is a fancy literary way of saying it's episodic.
Very episodic.
A picaresque comes from Spain, which is the term picaro, so... The good example of the classic picaresque or picaro narrative is, of course, our good pal, the man of La Mancha himself, Sir Don Quixote.
Ah.
Because if you've read Don Quixote And I'm one of the weirdos who has. It's very long. It was originally serialized, so it'd be kind of released monthly in chapters, like a comic book. And in that case, you'd read an episode, then kind of go to the next episode, go to the next episode, something like that. So when the whole thing is brought together, it does feel more like a series of episodes or vignettes than like a continuous narrative as in a traditional narrative film.
I'm always in the middle of a bunch of books. I'm actually a few chapters into Don Quixote. So and actually it's pretty good. Like I was intimidated by like the size of the book because it's like over 1,000 pages in really small print. And so I was like, I'll never get done with this. But then as I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is actually, it keeps your interest really well. So one day I'll finish that book.
I'm sure you will.
We got the hitchhiker, and they're going to hitchhike across the USA. Then he wants a ride to his commune.
Or his farm or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, or does the farm come first?
Well, it's kind of like in the same area. Because like he calls it the commune. And so it's just a bunch of hippies living off the land. But it's like dry land that's like dried out and they can't grow crops there or anything. But yeah, they're trying to just live on their own.
Living off the grid.
Yeah.
In communes, and then all die during the winter.
Staying off of Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah. Make fun of the Amish. Do like bad community theater impressions.
Oh, yeah, that was terrible.
That's what happens to all the theater kids.
They go live in hippie communes?
Yes.
And
they go perform for random stuff, and then
grow their hair out.
People are just like, get back to work.
Yeah, that's basically all it was, is they stop there and they've got all this stuff going on. They eat some of their food and they sit and party with them until like the theater kids come out and start singing. What were they singing? They were, it was really repetitive.
I don't remember.
I can't remember either. But it was one of those songs that just repeats over and over and over. And I just wanted to shoot myself by the time
Maybe it was
done.
Baby Shark.
It was Baby Shark.
Aha.
Oh man! So then they take a couple of the girls and go to the hot springs and skinny dip with them like you do. This was an interesting thing to learn about too. Was when you watch this, if you watch the way the hot springs is cut, I don't know if you know any of this. Fonda was actually in the hospital with pneumonia when they shot it. So when you see it's Hopper and the two girls swimming in the thing, and you see legs just like sitting up on the ledge. Those aren't Fonda's legs, but then they'll cut to them because they came back later, just Hopper and Fonda. And so there's scenes where Hopper and the girls are getting splashed from off screen, and then it cuts to Peter Fonda splashing to like cut it to make it look like he's splashing them, but it was like two completely different days.
Do what you gotta do.
I rewatched that scene because I was like, I didn't even notice that the first time, but yeah, he is not in any scenes with the girls.
It's saved by the edit.
So I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is funny. Poor guy.
The skinny dipping day and with two women, and he has to be in the hospital with pneumonia. Man, he missed out. Oh, we didn't mention that at the camp, Grizzly Adams was there, and he does have a beard.
Good to know. I didn't know.
Dan Haggerty. He was in the camp scene.
Okay.
And there was someone else in there too of note, but I can't remember who that was. There was little cameos here and there that interesting cameos. So after they go skinny dipping, we get another song, and they go on their merry way on their motorcycles again.
Yep.
And
then they go camping multiple times.
We missed that they went camping before the commune because they went camping with the hitchhiker.
Yeah.
And they were actually like all high and everything during that too. And apparently while they were filming it, that was on some sort of reservation where they weren't supposed to like be there. And like the park ranger was telling them to get out of there. And then they'd climb up on the things, and they're like, you can't be up there. So again, another one of those, we were high and I can't believe we got away with this.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about some indie movies, is that they get away with just crazy stuff that's very unethical that you should probably never do.
Yeah. And then you like laugh about it 30 years later. Yeah, we were climbing on like reservation stuff and the park ranger was telling us to get down. I was like, so you were really disrespectful and you made millions of dollars off of it.
It's the American way.
That is the American dream. Just be a disrespectful person and try and make money from it. But yeah, more camping, more driving down the road. There's a lot of driving down the road.
Yep. It's a road movie.
A lot of bridges.
A lot of gorgeous shots of sunsets, sunrises, scenery.
Yeah. There's a couple of shots that, like, apparently Dennis Hopper was pretty hard to work with on this movie. And there were some shots on the road. It's like, oh, we got to get here before the sun goes down and get this shot. And there's some great shots. So, like, I mean, him pushing them got some good cinematography. But apparently he was quite pushy through the movie. Because he was directing also, obviously.
He definitely evokes sort of the John Ford Western feel, you know, big landscapes. To even go to Monument Valley.
Yeah, and he even calls it like a Western on motorcycles. So, and it kind of is. It's just, you know, roaming the countryside down south and getting into trouble. And because then they...
and smoking lots of weed.
Bunch of weed in there. They eventually get to a small town and they just get on their motorcycles and go into a parade, and they get arrested for
parading without a permit.
Parading without a permit. Oh, come on, man! You can't be serious. And that's where they meet George Handsome.
George Hansen, yes, or
Hansen.
Yeah, George Hansen, played by a very young Jack Nicholson, who's
attorney at law
and drunk.
A drunk attorney in jail. But his daddy's got, like, money, so he gets out of jail without, with maybe a slap on the wrist. And he helps them get out of jail, too. And this is when the movie actually gets kind of entertaining. And this is, like, in the last half of the movie. Because Jack Nicholson is great in this.
Yeah, I like to assume that he was actually drunk during the entire filming, which would not surprise me.
Yeah, because, I mean, they basically were, and they do get him high in that scene where he's high. And I don't know if that was the first time he smoked or if that just, he didn't normally, but
maybe you should ask him.
Apparently, he was going to give up acting before this movie. And he was going to, like, produce or write or whatever. He wanted to do other stuff in Hollywood. And they got him to come into this movie. And he was, like, people responded so well to him that it's thanks to... So this is one thing. Whether you like the movie or not, thanks to Easy Rider, we have Jack Nicholson's post-Easy Rider career.
Which is a lot.
Yes, because his pre-Easy Rider was a lot of Corman stuff and low budget.
He was great in the one scene he showed up in the Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah. He played the it was the Bill Murray part.
Yes, from the musical version where he just
I like the pain.
He likes the pain.
He's always been great, but yeah, like this was the one that shot him to superstardom. And a couple months ago, I watched a really fascinating documentary called Corman's World, Exploits of a Hollywood Rebel. And they interviewed a bunch of people like I think Peter Fonda was one of them, and Jack Nicholson, and a lot of people that worked with Corman early on, even Martin Scorsese and all that. Because believe it or not, Scorsese's first movie was produced by Corman. So we have Corman to thank for Jack Nicholson, Scorsese.
Francis Ford Coppola, I believe.
Yeah.
So many people worked with Corman. He's kind of a very fascinating guy.
But anyone who grew up watching Nicholson knows that he has the ego the size of the planet. He could have played Ego the Living Planet. And apparently he even said, in the interview on Corman's World, he even said, when I went and watched Easy Rider for the first time and I saw people's reaction to me, that's when I thought, I'm a movie star. And I was like, wow, that is just straight to the head. But the thing is that everybody else who watched it said there's a movie star too. So
he wasn't necessarily wrong.
He wasn't wrong. He was just very egotistical about it.
Oh, that's why we love him.
That's Jack Nicholson though, and we do love his post Easy Rider career.
I mean, he was nominated for an Oscar every decade from the 60s to the 2000s. So
yeah, and there's a good reason for it. Another little thing was his little when he does the Nick, it became his character trait. And whenever he took a drink and Easy Rider. He apparently, the motorcycles, they had a guy who started them for him because, because Hopper kept saying in all the interviews and documentaries I watched, yeah, back then we didn't have like the little push button start, so we had to like kick the thing down. But then they had someone do that for them in the movie.
That's funny.
And so the guy who would start the motorcycles would do that when he was kick-starting the motorcycle. He'd go, Nick, 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 fire. So then Jack Nicholson uses that as a character trait. And then afterwards, they had to go to the guy and go, you can't really do that anymore because otherwise people will think you stole it from Nicholson.
Poor guy.
I was like, boy, that kind of sucks for that guy if that was just like something he did. It's like, now all of a sudden, like something that's like probably just a habit that he doesn't even realize he's doing. Now he has to like forcibly like think about not doing that. But I found that interesting because, it was little things like that made Jack Nicholson's character kind of interesting because he gave little quirks to it,
Mm-hmm.
So
he would definitely seem like he was having a good time.
Yeah. And they go camping because like you do, and Jack Nicholson talks about the government and aliens and apparently that's when he was getting high and he cracked up a part of it. But then from everything I've read and heard, they were actually quite impressed because he was super stoned and he was still remembering most of his lines. So
solid acting work.
Yeah, they were quite impressed with him.
That's the reason it was nominated for an Academy Award. It was because he was super high.
But yeah, to think someone who was going to quit acting, then they bring him into a movie and he gets a Best Supporting Actor nomination.
Yeah, while he's high.
While he's high. That's cool. So yeah, they're camping and everything, and a lot of they did bring in a guy named Terry Southern to write part of the script. He had worked on scripts such as like Barbarella, classic Barbarella.
More genre stuff, kind of low grade B movie stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. So he worked on some of the script, but a lot of the stuff was improvised, and they would come in and get like real people from small towns, like
people as extras. There's a restaurant scene where they go and try to get service.
Yeah,
and then the real people in the town don't like them and start talking about them.
Yeah,
and those are just real people who were living in that town.
And I think they were actually at the restaurant when they went to film because Hopper had someone go scout ahead for people. That he said, "Get me some real people," and he brought back like local theater actors. And I don't think Hopper was happy about that. And then they went to the restaurant where they were going to film, and there's a bunch of people in there. He goes, "I want those people." So then to get them to say like extra nasty stuff, he told them that they're filming a movie and our characters just raped and murdered a girl down the road, so nothing you can say is too bad for these characters. But the interesting thing is if you listen to all the stuff they say, and these are just real people, not actors doing lines, you know that that's stuff that they've said before. And It is horrid. Like, they're horrible people.
But it works.
It works really well, and I'm surprised that, I would say I'm surprised that they want to be on camera that way, but, people that are that horrible don't realize that, what they're doing is horrible, so...
I don't know. It's 50 years later.
Yeah. But, I mean, even back then, though, that's still some horrible stuff to say. And in a movie that's going to eventually make 60 million people, because that many people saw it. So,
and be put on the National Film Registry and preserved.
Yeah. So your evil hatred towards 1960s hippies is well documented. The other real people was actually when they got out of the jail with Jack Nicholson, the two, the sheriff and the deputy in the jail, they were actually the sheriff and deputy of the town.
Cool.
And I was quite impressed with all of the real people that they got in there.
And of course, big tip that they get from Jack Nicholson's character is, of course, that they should go to this one particular whorehouse that's supposed to be the best in all the South, in New Orleans. No, but it's not the best little whorehouse in Texas, though.
No, because apparently if you go through Texas, they'll scalp you if you have long hair like that in the 60s. Like, legit. That was an actual
but the best
concern.
little whorehouse in Texas has...
Dolly.
It's run by Dolly Parton, yeah.
Yes.
And Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, so they didn't go to we didn't get to see Dolly Parton and Burt Reynolds.
A real shame.
Although, this was Burt Reynolds. This was pre Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah, Smokey and the Bandit was 77, so
Yeah, so that was quite...
probably before he got big.
Yeah. But, there was one other place where they had a real actor too, was early in the movie, I forgot they stopped at a farm, because they had to do like the whole symbolism of...
fixing a horseshoe and fixing a tire for your motorcycle.
Yeah, flat tires. So like they had like them in the background fixing a tire and some ranchers putting a horseshoe on a horse and going, yeah, American dream. I'm out here living off the land.
Mm-hmm. With my zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance.
But then after the restaurant scene, they had another camping scene. And
then a bunch of people from town get mad and they kill Jack Nicholson.
And this is another interesting thing, is that this was filmed in the 60s when stuff like this was actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the stuff was improvised in the movie, but what was happening was Dennis Hopper would actually go and talk to people in these southern towns, and he'd hear stories, and these stories he incorporated into the movie itself. So like this is stuff that like you would get beat to death just associating with people with longer hair. Like whether you even knew they were hippie or not. It's just like if you have long hair down in the South in particular towns, even if you're well dressed and like a lawyer like Jack Nicholson, if you associate with those people, you're going to get beat. And it's frightening that, that kind of stuff happened. It's really eye-opening.
It makes the movie feel like a time capsule.
Yeah.
So it's dated, but dated in a good way.
Yeah, because that was the big thing about this movie, is the counterculture movement I was talking about, was that they were going, yeah, you've got all these movies that show like, people in makeup and nice clothes and all these fun stories like beach blanket bingos, and your Pillow Talk came out the same year as this. And
bikinis at Muscle Beach.
Yeah, and it's like, no, that's not real people. They wanted to show what's really happening in the United States.
What's real, bro?
What's real? Do you dig it? Can you dig, man? You got to talk like you're high the whole time, because they were high the whole time.
Because they were high the whole time.
Man. You got to have a lot of mans.
Now, did they actually take LSD when they took LSD later in the film?
No.
Well, that's disappointing.
I know, right? They only got high and probably drunk. So, but I think they were very high during that scene.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they go to the whorehouse.
They finally make it to New Orleans, like, oh, Peter Fonda's like, oh, man, I don't want to go to the whorehouse anymore. It's like, oh, come on, we got to do it for George.
George wanted us to go.
Yeah.
And so the two prostitutes that they go into the back room with are Karen Black and Tony Basil. Yes, the "Oh Mickey, you're so fine" Tony Basil.
Huh.
I did not realize that she must have been that old when she did Mickey. Because, I mean, this was 1969 and Mickey was from like the 80s. She was like 20 years later, and she's already looks like she's in her 20s or 30s in this movie.
Who knows?
No, because I just remember the music video where, like, she's jumping around like a cheerleader and all this stuff. And, like, I always thought, like, she was a lot younger during that music video.
Who knows?
Yeah, so... But I found it interesting. I'm like, I didn't know Tony Basil was, like, an actress, like, way before she did Mickey, because I grew up in the 80s. They go back there, and Fonda doesn't want to... He's not real interested in actually getting with the girl, so he's sitting with... I think he's with Tony, and Peter Fonda, and Hopper's over with the other one.
Karen.
What is it? Karen Black. And then finally they go, let's get out of here. And what's happening? Because they're in New Orleans.
The streets, go wander around, and it's Mardi Gras, because apparently every time a movie is in New Orleans, it's Mardi Gras.
Yeah. And this was the first stuff that they filmed for this movie.
Huh. Probably just makes sense schedule-wise, I suppose.
And I noticed that when I watched the movie for the first time, you get to this scene, and the video quality, like the quality of the movie, like really drops.
They changed film grain, yeah.
Yeah, and what happened was that they did all of the New Orleans stuff in 16 millimeter.
Yep.
And it was like, there were like 5 or 6 camera. They gathered like 5 or 6 people that had 16 millimeters, and they filmed this, and this was the first stuff they filmed. And they were supposed to go a month ahead of Mardi Gras, but Fonda had the time wrong, and they got there a week ahead of time, and they had to scramble for these people. And then they just started going out and filming all sorts of crap. And apparently, like, this was the very beginning, And Hopper was really on people, like not letting them go anywhere without him around, because he's like, the way Karen Black says it, like in her interview, she's like, he'd be like, don't go anywhere. Well, why? You got like some? No, just in case I got an idea. So you know, he had to have everyone around, and like he actually got in like an actual fist fight with one of the camera operators, I think, and they went through a door and all this stuff. So, and again, a crazy like.
The story behind this movie is nuts.
It's fascinating.
And it's amazing that this movie works so well as it does. It's very much saved by the edit.
Yeah.
Especially, I think, this scene, and then sort of the drug-taking scene.
Yeah, because they're like...
very well edited together in the cemetery.
Yeah, they're wandering around Mardi Gras, and then they go to a cemetery, and that's where... Well, first, one of the prostitutes said she didn't want a drink because she doesn't drink. And then this is where I was like, oh... Here's the 60s, where it's like, boy, don't do this in a movie anymore. It's, oh, I don't drink or anything. And then they get to the cemetery, and they're going to take LSD, and they're like, and she's like, what is this? Don't worry about it, just take it. And they shove it in her mouth.
Oh, boy.
I was like, boy, talk about date rape. That's terrible. Because then they're all... stoned off their minds and out of their minds in the cemetery and all.
Peter Fonda Tripp starts talking to a Virgin Mary statue
and
starts crying.
He was convinced. How much do you know about that?
I think he was told like it's supposed to be his mom or something.
Yeah, he was so high he didn't want to do it, but Hopper like was on him and convinced him to actually talk to the statue like it was his mother who had committed suicide when he was 10. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put that on film. And finally he did. And like, those are like real tears. And like, when he says shut up, he's actually so, like, he said he was so invested in talking and like asking why his mom did that someone else was talking off to the side. Like, it must have been a camera operator or whatever. And he's like, shut up. And like goes back to talking, and like he's actually talking to someone who was off to the side.
Just happened to be on set.
Yeah, who just happened to be there. Like, and they weren't supposed to. If that wasn't supposed to be part of the scene, it was just like so into it at that time. I was like, that's insane. Like, you know, the lengths they went through to get like shots like this, where it's like, I mean, that's a pretty impactful. The only thing is like I get the impact of the scene, but. And the camera work is all over the place because it's
confusing because of drugs.
But like to me, it's just like it almost seems like it's just all over the place, and I'm not even really invested in like him crying and the thing because it just cuts between that and another thing, and that and another thing is all over the place. I'm like, I get it's supposed to be confusion because of the drugs and all that stuff, but it was just annoying to me, and I'm like, I'm so annoyed I can't be invested in your character right now.
Well, that scene worked on me just fine, but you know, that's
and I get why it works on people. So if it worked for you and worked for other people, which obviously it works for a lot of people because people love this movie, it just didn't work for me. Because
you're a grumpy old man.
I am a grumpy old man.
Yeah,
but I do appreciate the things that they did to get this movie done. That's, you know, the biggest part of it, and. So after they get all high and do all that, then next morning they get on the road again and they're going to head to Florida. And
he says, well, we blew it.
Yeah, that's basically it. Because Hopper wanted like more dialogue there. He's like, you need to say more than that. And Fonda's like, well, I just kept saying we blew it and I wouldn't say any more. Because, and this was another thing where like, I'm going, do you even know what you meant by this? Because he kept saying, because I wanted it to be enigmatic, man. And I wanted people to have to figure out what we were saying with this and the ending and all that. I'm going, you have no idea what you were saying with this, do you?
Well, the author intention doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, it's how you interpret it.
Yeah, which I get to a certain extent, but when it's to a point where you go, well, I want the audience to figure it out because I don't have it figured out. I'm going, well, then it's like,
well, that's okay. I think.
Yeah, it almost seems like a cop out. Like, I don't know what to do with this, so we'll just leave it up to your imagination. It is okay, but it was all about. I mean, the whole movie was about them being free from the government and free to do what they want because they had the big score, they had money, but then they kind of lost sight of their freedom because, and because they were
the
trying
world grinding them down, man.
Yeah, man.
So if anything, this movie is less of a celebration of the counterculture movement and more of a eulogy for the counterculture movement, because ultimately they do fail and they do die and then they do get killed for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, because they're hippies. Die, hippie scum.
And like the free love movement of the counterculture movement of the 60s, it didn't last.
Yep. Oh, and the people that killed them at the end, those were two more people where they went into town and they're like, oh, I want that guy with the goiter on his neck to kill me. Like, okay, let's do that. So they get shot with a shotgun, and then the American gas tank with the money in it blows up. Their American dream blows up. The end. Helicopter pan up. I want to say that was like the person who owned the helicopter. I don't know if it was Barry Seal or if it was someone related to Barry Seal. Or someone that Barry Seal knew. Mm-hmm. I think they had mentioned. I was like, that's interesting. They could have got all their drugs from them.
Yep. Good movie. Everyone should watch it at least once. You don't have to like it, but you can still learn to appreciate it.
Yeah, and that's
kind of like abstract art. You don't necessarily have to like the abstract art, like the Picasso, but it is interesting to know the techniques he used and the thought process he was working through for his pieces.
Yeah. And I guess for me, that's what I would recommend for is people who are interested in film history. This is a very important film. Other than that, if you're not interested in learning this period of film history, I honestly it's okay. I don't really truly care for it. I think Jack Nicholson's entertaining, but
you uncultured swine.
I know this is where I'm gonna get a lot of hate because Oh,
no,
but you're supposed to love Easy Rider.
You're wrong, but but I respect your opinion.
Because when it comes down to it, it's like half the movie is rock music with them driving down a highway. And it's just like, it's so tedious. And then drive down a highway, stop at a camp, get stoned, talk about like...
Looking for adventure.
Whatever comes my way.
Yes.
And then go and ride some more on the highway, stop in a town, get arrested, get stoned with someone in the jail.
Yeah, it's almost... It sounds repetitive when you describe it like that, but and it can be a little repetitive.
Yeah, and there is some interesting stuff in it. At least it's not the 4-hour cut that Dennis Hopper originally cut himself.
Sheesh.
And he was actually mad when they had to cut it down because it's like, apparently the quote was, "You turned my movie into a long TV show." It's like, do you think people want to watch a 4-hour movie?
I'm sure there are people out there who'd be interested in watching it.
Yeah. Well, because they were also supposed to... Peter Fonda wanted Crosby, Stills, and Nash to create music for the entire movie, but Hopper behind Fonda's back got rid of them, and he told Crosby, Stills, and Nash, he goes, "Anyone who rides in a limo, man, doesn't understand what my movie's about. If you ever come into the studio again, I'm going to have to threaten physical violence."
Yeah, he's like that college freshman film bro.
Yeah, just you don't understand what I'm
art about real people, bro.
Yeah, if you ride in a limo, you don't know what I'm about, man. Mm-hmm. As I make $60 million and become like a big movie star, man. So so much interesting backstory to this. If you're interested in film history at all, take a look at this movie, and this is streaming on Sony Crackle right now. So that's the free streaming service, or one of the streaming services, because we always do a streaming movie. However, if you get a chance, rent or buy or whatever the Criterion collection of Easy Rider. And there's 2 commentaries on there. There's a couple of documentaries on there. A lot of interesting stuff. So I would highly recommend, if you really want to look into this movie, go check out, don't just watch it on streaming. Go out and check out the Criterion Blu-ray or Criterion DVD. So yeah, you give it a thumbs up.
Yes.
I give it a thumb sideways. I don't hate the movie. I think it's more interesting in its cultural relevance than I do as a movie.
Kind of as a historical artifact.
Yeah. More that way than artistically. I think, not artistically, but you know what I'm saying. It's like more entertaining to find out the history of this and how it influenced movies beyond than the movie itself. Because I don't think it's aged well either, other than being, like you said earlier, a time capsule of what it was like in the 60s. So, and that's another thing. If you're interested in that time period, and you want to watch a movie, a fictional movie, and actually get a real sense of what it was like in the South in the 60s, then definitely take this into account. So, double feature time.
Okay, I actually have 2 suggestions. One is a documentary called GimMe Shelter. It's about a Rolling Stones concert from around the same time period. Is also considered to help sort of shepherd the end of the counterculture movement, because there was this free concert in San Francisco, and where it ended up where someone got stabbed right in front of the band, and the documentary crew even caught it partially on camera, and how this whole concert was supposed to be a free concert, last celebration of the end of their summer tour, and it just did not go well very at all, because they hired like the Hells Angels for security, and these were like the hardcore Hells Angels, and they paid them in beer. Too many people showed up, and it was just an absolute disaster of a concert in every way, shape, or form, and ended up with someone's death. So
I've heard of this one, but I didn't actually know what this was about. I've
it's
heard
interesting
of the movie.
because you actually do get reactions from the band themselves watching the footage, so they are involved.
I'll have to check that one out. That sounds very interesting.
And then the other one I have is also, you could arguably just takes place just after this era in early 1970, 1971. And that is Terry Gilliam's adaptation of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And it also, thematically, it feels around the same era of a eulogy for the end of the counterculture movement, especially with just the sort of voiceovers and monologues that Hunter S. Thompson gives, played by Johnny Depp in this film. And that movie is nuts visually. It gives you even more of a sense of what it's like to be on drugs all the time.
That's actually a good recommendation. Didn't even think of that. I was trying to come up with, I had trouble thinking of a recommendation for this movie because there's so much about this movie. There's not a lot of movies like this. There's a lot of stuff that came afterwards that, were inspired, you could say inspired by this, but there's not a lot of movies like this one. I'm just going to say, you gave 2 recommendations, so I'm just going to say, if you want a more entertaining movie where it's just 2 guys getting stoned all the time, I think you should watch the first Cheech and Chong movie, Up in Smoke. You get 2 guys smoking all the time, and hilarity ensues. And you get a cameo by Stacy Keach as a cop, I think.
Huh.
Like that was in the mid to late 70s when that one was filmed. Or maybe it was even early 70s, because that was their first movie. So anyway, that is the film. And now we're on to find out what our next movie is, and I don't have this pulled up, so I'm just gonna pull this up while I just keep on talking, I guess.
And I'm gonna breathe heavily into the microphone.
Heavily and seductively. Creep everyone out. All right. We got to stop that now. Movie roulette. And Rotten Tomatoes, 70% or better. What do we got? Do we want a genre, or we just go all genres?
Let's do all genres.
All genres and spin. Oh, a crime drama movie.
What is it?
This is Port of Shadows from 1938.
Interesting.
96% on Rotten Tomatoes.
How many reviews?
That's a good question. It doesn't ever say.
Yeah, that's one parameter they should be able to adjust, is like,
yeah,
whatever reviews or more.
Well, because they actually show how many votes there are in the IMDb audience thing. Out of 7,000, it's got a 7.7. So
okay, well that means nothing because IMDb is
that's IMDb. But this one is down a foggy, desolate road to the port city of Le Havre travels Jean, an army deserter looking for another chance to make good on life. Fate, however, has a different plan for him, as acts of both revenge and kindness render him front page news. And this is on Canopy.
Cool.
Which, for those that don't know out there, if you have a public library membership in most cities, you can use that membership to watch movies for free on a site called Canopy, and it's Kanopy. So it's a really invaluable source for a lot of interesting films.
They're especially good with more educational stuff too. That
Yeah.
would be harder to find on something like Netflix or Hulu. Or
Yeah, and they have a lot of independent stuff and a lot of like more artsy movies and stuff like that. So yeah, 1938, Port of Shadows.
Woo!
So,
And until then, smoke them if you got them.
you dig, man.
And also make sure to find us on social media with Kyle at @AwesomeCam and me at Noah_Saturn. That's SATERN.
And
now,
then Instagram at We Don't Know What to Watch.
can you dig it? Yes, we can.
Fire.